The little Comanche girl was barely breathing when the cowboy found her alone in the desert, covered in blood, freezing, and too weak to speak. Everyone in town warned him not to touch her. They said helping a Comanche could start a war. But the cowboy ignored them and carried the dying child back to his ranch. For 3 days and nights he fought to keep her alive. Then, just before sunrise, the sound of hoofbeats thundered across the valley. 50 armed Comanche warriors appeared out of the dust, surrounding his ranch in complete silence. The townspeople locked their doors. The cowboy stepped outside alone, hand trembling near his revolver, because he had no idea whether the warriors had come to thank him or kill him. The desert outside Red Hollow stretched for miles without mercy. Dry winds swept across the empty land, carrying dust through the rocky trails and dead grass. Elias Boone rode slowly beneath the fading evening sun, searching for a missing calf that had wandered from his ranch 2 days earlier. Elias preferred the quiet of the open land over the noise of town. Most people in Red Hollow knew him as a hard-working cowboy who kept to himself. He rarely spoke unless necessary. Years of loss and violence had carved deep lines into his face and turned silence into a habit he could not break. As he guided his horse through a narrow canyon trail, something caught his attention overhead. 3 vultures circled low near a cluster of rocks. Elias narrowed his eyes. Usually vultures meant death. He pressed his boots lightly against his horse and rode toward the spot. The closer he came, the more uneasy he felt. Broken footprints marked the dirt. There were signs of a struggle. A torn piece of cloth hung from a thorn bush nearby. Then he saw her. A young Comanche girl lay half-hidden beside a large rock, barely moving. Her dark hair was tangled with sand, and blood stained the side of her dress. A gunshot wound cut through her shoulder. Her face was pale from fever and exhaustion. Elias quickly climbed down from his horse and knelt beside her. The girl opened her eyes for only a second. Fear flashed across her face when she saw him. Her trembling hand grabbed weakly at his sleeve before falling away again. She could not have been older than 12. Elias looked around the canyon carefully. Whoever attacked her could still be nearby. The smart decision would have been to leave immediately and ride back to town. Trouble between settlers and Comanche tribes had filled the frontier with enough graves already. If anyone in Red Hollow learned he brought a Comanche girl home, they would not welcome it. But when Elias looked at the child lying helpless in the dirt, something inside him refused to walk away. Without another thought, he removed his coat and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. Then he lifted her carefully onto his horse and began the long ride back to his ranch. Night had fully settled by the time he arrived home. He carried the girl inside and laid her on the small bed near the fireplace. Her skin burned with fever. Elias cleaned the wound as best he could, using warm water and old medical supplies he had not touched in years. The girl cried out softly in pain, but never fully woke. Hours passed. Rain tapped against the windows, while Elias sat beside the bed, holding a lantern in one hand. He had seen many wounded people during his life, but something about this child reminded him of a pain he had spent years trying to bury. Near midnight, the girl finally whispered a single word in a weak voice, before drifting back into darkness. Elias did not understand the language, but he understood fear, and deep down he knew trouble had already found its way to his door. Morning arrived cold and gray over the ranch. Elias had not slept. He sat near the fireplace while the young girl rested quietly beneath a wool blanket. Her breathing had become steadier during the night, though fever still burned across her face. Outside, rainwater dripped from the roof as Elias stepped onto the porch. The desert smelled fresh after the storm, but the uneasy feeling in his chest had only grown stronger. He knew the town would hear about the girl sooner or later. By afternoon, the news had already spread through Red Hollow. Elias rode into town for medicine and supplies. The moment he stepped inside the general store, conversation stopped. Several men standing near the counter stared at him with suspicion. Sheriff Tom Grady leaned against the wall with folded arms. "Word says you brought a Comanche into your home," the sheriff said quietly. Elias placed coins on the counter for bandages and medicine. "She is a wounded child." "That may be," Grady replied, "but folks around here are scared. You know what tensions are like." Elias said nothing. An older rancher named Walter Pike stepped forward angrily. "You should have left her where you found her. If warriors come looking for her, this town pays the price." Murmurs of agreement filled the store. Elias slowly turned toward the crowd. A dying child was left alone in the desert. "I was not about to leave her there." Some looked away in shame. Others remained cold. Sheriff Grady lowered his voice. "Just be careful, Elias. Fear makes people dangerous." Elias collected the supplies and left without another word. Back at the ranch, the girl finally woke as evening settled across the plains. She panicked at first, trying weakly to sit up before pain forced her back down. Elias kept his distance and spoke calmly. "You are safe here." The girl studied him carefully with tired eyes. After a long silence, she whispered her name, Nayeli. Elias nodded once. "I am Elias." Over the next 2 days, Nayeli slowly regained strength. She spoke little English, but enough for simple conversation. Elias learned she had been traveling with family members through the canyon trails before armed men attacked them. One night, while firelight flickered across the cabin walls, Nayeli finally revealed more. "There were 6 men," she said softly. "White men with guns. Their leader wanted my father to tell him where something was hidden." Elias listened closely. He heard people. Nayeli continued. "My father refused. We escaped into the canyon, but they followed us." "Do you know the leader's name?" Elias asked. Nayeli hesitated before answering. "Mercer." The moment Elias heard the name, his expression darkened. Clyde Mercer was no ordinary outlaw. Years earlier, he had been a soldier known for cruelty and greed. Stories about him spread across the frontier like ghost tales. Entire camps had disappeared after crossing his path. If Mercer was hunting the girl, danger was closer than Elias imagined. Then, far outside in the darkness, came the distant sound of horses. Elias moved quickly toward the window, as the sound of horses echoed across the dark plains. Nayeli froze beside the fireplace, fear filling her eyes. "How many?" she whispered. Elias listened carefully. "More than a few." He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside into the cold night air. Moonlight stretched across the desert, while shadows moved along the distant hills. Riders. For several long moments, Elias watched silently. Then the figures disappeared back into the darkness. By sunrise, tension had spread through Red Hollow. Word about the riders reached town before breakfast. Men loaded rifles and gathered near the sheriff's office, while frightened families stayed indoors. Before noon, Sheriff Grady arrived at Elias's ranch with 3 armed ranchers behind him. "You need to send the girl away," Grady said firmly. "People think the Comanche are coming for her." "She stays here," Elias answered. Walter Pike spat into the dirt. "You are risking every life in town for one girl." Before Elias could reply, Nayeli stepped onto the porch behind him. Though weak, her voice stayed steady. "My people are not coming for war." The men exchanged uneasy looks. Suddenly, one of the ranchers pointed toward the horizon. Dust clouds rolled across the valley. Dozens of riders emerged from the desert in complete silence. Mounted warriors moved together like shadows beneath the morning sun. Their painted faces and raised spears sent fear through the air. Elias counted quickly. Nearly 50. At the front rode an older warrior with sharp eyes and silver-braided hair. Nayeli stared at him in shock. "My grandfather," she whispered. The mounted warriors stopped just beyond the ranch fence. Silence covered the valley so heavily that even the horses seemed still. No one moved. Elias stood near the porch with his rifle lowered but ready. Sheriff Grady and the ranchers slowly backed away, their hands shaking near their weapons. Then Nayeli stepped forward. Ignoring the pain in her shoulder, she walked alone toward the line of warriors. The older chief climbed down from his horse before she reached him. His face remained hard at first, but the moment he saw her clearly, his expression changed. He placed both hands gently on her shoulders and spoke rapidly in Comanche. Nayeli answered through tears. The other warriors watched in stunned silence. After a long moment, Nayeli turned back toward Elias. "He thought I was dead," she said softly. The chief studied Elias carefully before walking toward him. Every rancher nearby tightened with fear. When the chief stopped only a few feet away, he reached to his belt and removed a carved knife with a worn bone handle. Slowly, he offered it to Elias. Nayeli spoke quietly. "It belonged to my father." Elias accepted the knife without speaking. For the first time since the riders arrived, the tension in the valley began to ease. But far beyond the hills, another pair of eyes watched the ranch from a distance. Clyde Mercer had found them. From the top of a distant ridge, Clyde Mercer lowered his spyglass and stared at the ranch below. A slow smile crossed his scarred face as he counted the Comanche warriors gathered around the property. "This just keeps getting better," he muttered. One of his men shifted nervously beside him, You still want the girl alive? Mercer turned cold eyes toward him. She knows where the canyon is. Without her, the silver stays buried. Back at the ranch, uneasy peace settled over the afternoon. Black Eagle and several warriors entered Elias's home, while others remained outside guarding the land. Though the tension had softened, distrust still lingered between the settlers and the Comanche. Inside the cabin, Naya Ali explained everything. Her father had protected the location of a sacred canyon hidden deep in the mountains. Mercer believed rich silver veins rested inside it. But to the Comanche, the canyon was more than treasure. It was sacred ground tied to their ancestors. Elias listened quietly as the fire cracked beside them. Then he looked toward the darkening window. Mercer would come soon, and next time he would not come quietly. What began as a simple act of mercy had now turned into something far bigger than Elias Boone ever imagined. A wounded child, a warrior tribe, and a ruthless outlaw had all become tied together by one choice in the desert. Peace was fragile, trust was still new, and somewhere beyond the hills, Mercer was already preparing his next move. Elias knew one thing for certain: the real fight had not even begun. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more powerful Western tales.